Welcome back on the AM show. The fire, I just said, hasn't been doused yet. Hopefully, our leaders will feel the pinch of it and act. But from here, we move into our big stories. And the first one we're looking at has to do with the Media Foundation for West Africa. A few days ago, in fact, 2 days ago, they organized an event focusing on hate speech in the media and democratic consolidation in Ghana. Well, today, to help us expand on that, on the bit about abusive language, hate speech, the media, and responsibility, we have joining us in the studio Dr. Kojo Imprem. He's Director of Research and Advocacy with the Media Foundation for West Africa. We also have Abigail Labi Odey, Manager, Media and Good Governance Program, Media Foundation for West Africa. I always start with this. If I murdered any portion of your name, say it now or forever hold your peace. Yeah. So which portion did I murder?
No, you got it.
I got it right.
I think you got my Imprem correctly pronounced. People just struggle with that.
All right. So let's get into the thrust of the conversation. But even before we get there, Doc, I'd like to find out, why did you put together this program? You brought on board the NMC, many other bodies. Why the need for this program in the first place?
Right, thank you. And let me put it into this perspective. The issue of hate speech is, as my colleague said, it's a pandemic that is coming. And I think it's already there. But we haven't amplified it the way we thought it should be in terms of a conversation around it. Right. Some time ago, we've had a partnership with National Peace Council, National Media Commission, in helping them to put a document together. It's a guideline. Of course, their own document, but we made an input to it. I was fortunate at the time. I was working with National Peace Council, so I led the process. So hate speech is a global issue. When you look at the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, it set the tone, which is that all human beings are born equal. We have dignity, we have right. That does not really talk about hate speech, but if you go further to 1965 International Convention of Elimination Against Racism, it's more specific on hate speech, And back home in Ghana, our Constitution, Chapter 5, is categorical. If you read clause 12, 21, and 17, it's mandating state actors, to ensure that we are equally respected, we have freedom of speech and association and all that. Over the period, hate is hate. But unfortunately, it happens in private circles, in group circles. But we have seen that the mass media has become the medium through which political actors, media inclusive, has been using that platform to amplify the concerns or propagate hate speech. But let me also say that hate speech did not necessarily start with the emergence of new media, which we may talk about it. It has been there into the traditional senses. But the problem is that the new media has a structure. It's decentralized. It has an animal structure. It has connectivity interactions, and it has a mobilization ability. And therefore, the ability of using social media has amplified the threat of hate speech to national cohesion, to democratic values, to governance, to building the nation together. And that's why we thought National Peace Council has a mandate of putting mechanism to prevent conflict, putting a mechanism to resolve conflict, and putting a mechanism for sustainable peace. NMC has equally a statutory mandate to ensure that media content are regulated in a certain way that brings professionalism. And of course, as Media Foundation for West Africa, as non-state actor, we have a responsibility of empowering voices, of empowering the media to put right professionalism in place. And therefore, we thought this concern had been there for a very long time. It is time for us to bring to a national conversation. And that triggered that initiative from our end. And partnering also with the National House of Chiefs that has a traditional mandate to ensure that we work together. So that's the reason why we put this concept together.
And the National House of Chiefs, we've also seen, Abigail, how sometimes our traditional rulers themselves, first of all, they are not supposed to wade into politics. They are, a lot of them. Paramountcies and all of that involved. And sometimes the things they say border on exactly what we're talking about. hate speech. But even before you get into what the traditional authorities, why they are crucial to this, because as for the NMC, media, hate speech, yes, they'll definitely come in. But the traditional authorities, I found that very apt. But how would you describe hate speech? I'm sure some people are watching us and they're asking, now, hate speech in Ukraine, what is hate speech?
Okay, so like Ojo said, hate is hate. Hate speech manifests in different forms. You look at categories like insults, provocative comments. You look at gender stereotypical comments. So there are comments about why a woman should not, wade into male domains, for instance, and then somebody would just pass a comment like that. Then there are also the tribal
Reminds me of,
slurs.
I think in Kenya also, a woman who was shamed, a member of parliament, because she had her period. And now she's a campaigner. She was shamed in parliament.
Yeah, so really
that is a form of hate.
So basically comments that tend to bring negative feelings to people, disdain, solicit disdain from people, comments that make people or groups feel dehumanized.
Marginalized.
Exactly. So once I pass a comment that makes you feel dehumanized, like Ojo said, we all have the right to life, which is a fundamental human right. And then also we have the freedom of expression and freedom of speech. But then in exercising that freedom of speech, you do that within the context of respect for humanity, respect for others' views, others' opinions. We are talking about ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation and all of that. If at any point in time there is any comment that comes that tends to impugn on any of these things, it is likely to incense people towards any action, towards violence, towards anything that they would also do to make them feel better. And I think that we've had instances during elections. Even there's the Rwandan genocide case that is cited often.
I was
because
about to get right into that.
One group actually felt impugned, one group felt disrespected, and all of that. So basically, hate speech, it's something that it's any form of narrative, any form of conversation, words. And I want to cite this actually document by the National Peace Council. It talks about a speech that encourages audience to have negative feelings or, get into negative actions, utterances that depict others as inherently inferior. There is also utterances that dehumanize, as I've talked about. They are the cultural stereotypes. And I think that some of these things are so much with us, even in our socialization, where we tend to, impugn a certain ethnic group for something. And these people are known for this. This group is known for that.
Witch doctors and this and that.
And then we grow.
Exactly.
We grow with them, unfortunately, and sometimes they escalate into incitement. And then we also have even pictures published in the media which could lead to ethnic, religious, or racial discrimination, stories or essays used by media houses ridiculing others. And then we have the insult, prejudice, bigotry, ethnic slur, stereotyping, incitement. At the Media Foundation for West Africa, during elections, we usually monitor language used by political party communicators and the media houses also that allow their platforms to be used for such. And over 3 election years that we have monitored, 2012, 2016, 2020, what the data shows is that when it comes to electioneering periods, provocative comments, insightful comments are the most leading indecent expressions that we have. So we see political party opponents using insults, using provocative comments, using insightful comments against their opponents. And then other one, unsubstantiated allegations that are meant to impugn the reputation of another. By the time you delve into the issue, trying to fact check and bring out the facts, the character of a person or an individual or a group has been assassinated, damage is done. And so hate is hate, and it's about time that we actually do something about it as a nation, maybe raise the profile of the conversation to a national level so that we can make real actions that help to deal with it.
And the inflammatory aspect of, I don't want to cite certain incidents on pain of, but in recent times, yesterday even, I had a conversation with a certain Reverend Professor on some national matters, which we'll be showing you one of these days. And the whole bit about what the Archbishop Ajinasare said and the context in which it was said. And of course, sometimes you don't mean, I mean, how many of us don't know the learned and the very affable Ajinasare? But you see what he said, maybe innocently, innocuously, and how it's been taken, which is why we all ought to be more circumspect in the things we say, whether as a media person, as you, or the Media Foundation for West Africa, and more. But just how inimical is hate speech? I want us to stay there for a while, because sometimes it happens in these entities, the media. Some may say it on some fronts, like we saw recently, a certain minister saying certain things that were, I don't want to, but not just him. People on his side, people on the other side, in the past, in the present, and hopefully not in the future. How inimical is it on the back of the point I was about to make, which you mentioned, 1994, the genocide? Part of it, not the whole of it, but part of it had to do with people sitting on broadcast media, saying certain things, fueling certain thoughts, and we saw the disaster. How inimical is it to our national life?
It is a threat burden to the peace in Ghana specifically, but I said it's a global problem. Excuse me. It is gaining notoriety now because of social media. Ordinary, traditional media, we don't want to go into that, but what Bishop Ajinasare said, if we hadn't had the social media,
it wouldn't be blown out.
It would have been blown out. And social media, because we sent in the messaging, photography, video, cartoonist, any other form, and because it's interactive in real time, within a second, it's reached millions of people. So by the time we came back from Monday or so, that statement is all over and the damage is unrepairable because people have access to the information. The same way when it's a political statement, and unfortunately from 2008, 2012 and 16 elections, we have had very unsavory comment from political leaders that were condemnable. They attracted high public rate issue on that, and some of them somehow render apology, others too thought, well, it's fine. It happened because of the tribal element. Sometimes we quickly go and apologize because we don't want to bring division among that. But when it's a political issue, a political statement, supporters and party machinery want to inframe that. And that divide us, as I said, is undermine peace, it undermines national cohesion. It is supporting two other forms. One, we have the physical battle, and now we're in the era of information battle. So social media is pushing the issue of information battle. I can give another issue why it is more inimical to our peace. If you look at what is happening in Boku chieftaincy crisis, I've had privilege to do a research recently in that. We find out that hate speech is one of the new weapons that is fueling the conflict. Apart from the antagonism between the two ethnic groups, and I'm happy yesterday that there's a shuttle diplomacy from Otumfo, and I'm sure Peace Council, the institution, are behind this instance, which is very good. But if you go and do an analysis, comments that are coming from both ethnic groups are insightful, very inflammatory, very attacking.
People have shown me WhatsApp groups where there are conversations, and sometimes my heart, because if you look at some of the things people are saying on certain platforms, you ask yourself, is this another intractable conflict? Is it even soluble, so to speak? Can you resolve it?
It's cannot, and I'm saying that because of the research I did, and I was sharing with my other colleagues the last time, that this is a bomb that is sitting and it's likely to explode at any point in time because we have not been deliberate. And you see, we at Media Foundation, sometimes also want to ensure that you need to strike a balance between freedom of speech, access to information, and people's right to speak, and then also the excesses of social media. Every technology comes with excess, every innovation comes with excess, every phenomenon comes with excess. We think that, or in my perspective, it is time for us to have a conversation on this threat to peace. How do we, if you don't want to pass a law on social media, for example, there should be some code of ethics. There should be some regulation of some sort that regulates all how much we can say at each point in time. Otherwise, this threat, and as we are going towards election next year, the political parties under the 8th Parliament, somehow we are seeing a little bit of decorum in their political campaigning. But we are hoping that they will stay on that tangent.
I mean, we've had ugly incidents.
Yeah.
That's an optimism.
Pardon my repeating this, the bee widow thing. You remember in Parliament with the placards.
Yeah.
And the speaker at the time having to say that, I mean, now the hoisting of placards and all of that, but it communicates same.
It's good that you brought the Parliament thing. When I did analysis, you could see that the ethnic group, especially the youth, are picking statements from the floor of Parliament to support the allegation of the conflict. So it was supported, and that's why statement from that angle is supporting, is amplifying, is enlarging the content of hate speech.
But I think, Kojo, we should also make the point that it's really soluble, especially now that we have a high-profile personality like Otumfo, stepping in. To mediate the conversation. On the side of media, we were concerned, and I remember the National Media Commission had to at some point then issue a very strong-worded statement about how the media was being weaponized or is being weaponized in all of the situation in Boku, and that's where we are very much concerned, because we also noticed that people are going into echo chambers, even online and offline, when it comes to the attention economy. And so if you're online, people are within WhatsApp groups and they are mobilizing and they are planning, and that's where we should be concerned about and be able to call out some of these things and say, no, hate is hate, and the more we propagate hate against a group or an individual, it's likely to escalate because it will incite people to violence. I really think that there's a lot of work on a number of stakeholders to deal with this issue. The UN, for instance, has come up, I think, June 18 as the International Day on Countering Hate Speech, globally, so that we would draw attention to the conversation about hate speech and its effect on democratic values.
Are you planning anything for that day?
We'll leave that to the UN. We'll leave that to the UN. And I think that is also in line with that day that we had to organize the forum that we held on Wednesday.
I think another crucial angle, especially as we're talking social media, like you said, Doc, many, many years ago, there were things you could have said which may have been out of turn, in poor taste, but you would be able to backtrack quickly and people wouldn't make a meal of it. But now, you say it and your detractors are there and they will take it, lap it up and spread it everywhere. The danger there is artificial intelligence, and even worse, deep fake. So you see a certain leader. It could be Akufo-Addo, it could be Mahama, it could be Joe Biden, it could be former President Trump, and you see the person saying all these negative things. What you don't know is that it is deep fake, it is technology, and it is not actually the person saying anything. It's like AI now. You can go on some apps and they can pick someone's, let's say Drake, the musician, pick his mannerisms and all of that, and compose a song for you, and you would actually believe the voice, everything, and it's not. So it's a very dangerous terrain we're in now, and how to deal with it, I don't know how prepared we are.
And even with artificial intelligence, there is a lot of conversation right now about what internet companies can do and what people are also coming up with the artificial intelligence, different models can do to protect democratic values. Because indeed, if we leave it to companies, they'll probably think more about commercialization and leave out issues of inclusion, issues of how we ensure that the marginalized in society are covered when it comes to AI. So it's really a big conversation that is going on that will require everybody to be on the table for that to happen.
Yes, in addition, and I'm happy you brought the artificial intelligence consent rate. One of the ways we thought we could solve the problem with the excesses of social media was through fact-checking, which is good, was through information literacy education, which is good, was through media professionalism, which is good. But the thing is that these things I've mentioned cannot match the muscles of artificial intelligence.
In fact, there are some people who, for lack of maybe education to a certain extent or something, they will take everything they see, hook, line, sinker. You don't have the opportunity of letting them know this thing is actually not right.
And that is why, in my view, we need to be honest to ourselves and confront the challenge at a national level and begin to have a conversation. Because, you see, When we don't do that and a catastrophe happens to this country, to social media, it gives the political actors opportunity to now come in. And when they come in, they come to draconian laws. I can give you an example. We all had in this country where universities have academic freedom, it's their freedom. But we never anticipate that a government will come and try to now formulate a law around that to curtail their freedom, and they have to fight it. So if we are not honest and start a conversation about the excess of social media and say, how do you regulate it? How do you come out with some code of conduct? How do you strike the balance between freedom of speech, press freedom, at the same time monitoring and managing the excesses of social media in the context of social hate speech or hate content? Then it will blow. And when it blows, it gives a chance to political authorities to channel on that. And when they do that, then we are all in trouble. We are all in a problem. So social media is doubling the evil of hate speech because I've told you about its structure and this. But what can we do? I think that we all have a responsibility. The media, for example, on conflict-sensitive reporting is extremely important. Media Foundation has been doing that. I'm aware National Peace Council and NMC, GGA to some extent, are training lead media on how to report circumspectively, on how to report conflict-sensitive. Peace journalism, in this case, is a very critical element. How do you also ensure that civil society are beginning to do cohort training on information literacy and digital issues to bring all of us to the inclusion? So we have to begin to unpack our intervention, looking at women, looking at youth, to train them on information literacy and digital literacy to do that. Also, at the state level, there's a law, and I think Media Foundation, we have always come forcefully, against that law, which is the Article 29 and 208 of the Public Order Act 1960, and also the Article 75, Clause 1 of the Communication Act. Especially the first one, it's a publication of falsehood. It's not only on media, but unfortunately, because the law enforcement have been heavily tackling the media on anger, we always come in to defend. But when you publish falsehood, it's a falsehood. And it's a cut across political circles. It's a cut across religious circles. It's across the civil society. Everybody who publishes falsehood is culpable by that law. And
people would focus more on media.
Exactly, but that's where the discrimination comes in.
If a prominent character puts it up, then it's problematic. But
and we're not being honest to ourselves, because we thought the media are the first culprit, but not. Rather, I think that the political actors are the first culprit, because they have the followers, they have the platform. Now we are where they are going on campaign, and their ability, I won't say that all what they are saying may be true. There might be element of falsehood in there. Yeah. There might be the element of hate speech. We see them all the time. But so many come to mind already. I don't want to say exactly. We take it for granted. But when a media practitioner say it, there's a big issue. Yeah. And then the law enforcement want to take the media on. That's where we come in and say, you're not being fair in implementing the law. You're not being fair in enforcing the law. The law cut across. So when we begin to look at that law and we apply it equally, we are sanitizing the system, in my view.
But that's also where the gatekeeping role, of the media should come in, because like we do in our language monitoring, we say the media is equally liable if you allow your platform. So if a politician is on at a rally, and making all manner of comments that are unsubstantiated, it is our responsibility to fill in that gap with fact-check information. Otherwise, then we also just propagate whatever it is, and we should be liable. I remember that was it 2012 also, the Muntie 3 incident. Yeah. We had consistently reported, on the kind of abusive language that was constantly coming up from that particular radio station and those three people. We kept putting out information. We kept putting up until it escalated and the court had to come in. And so we really have a responsibility as media. We can't leave it all out to the politicians.
It's not a responsibility we can shirk. And in this house, we do a lot of fact-checking, a lot of data stuff, like I was doing before you came on air and all of that, just to paint that picture, because we're held to such high standards. And I feel that is another thing that we have to look at. Standards for the media.
Yeah.
Standards.
Yeah, but before we go to the standard, I think that we've left one big fish in this issue out, which is the tech companies.
Okay.
It is time that for example, Ministry of Information, Ministry of Communication Digitization, National Communication, it's time for us to begin to have a conversation with the tech companies, the Facebook, the Twitter.
They have their policies when it comes
but they have
to
a policy,
but things still filter through.
You have a policy, but you're operating within the national law. You are in Ghana, you are operating. So we have to now begin to say, what are the green flags? What are the red flags? Which can you monitor? Which can you flag? And eventually remove this account, because it's causing a threat to people. It's causing a threat to our survival. It's causing a threat to our peace. So that conversation also needs to happen for us to begin to think through what are the best mechanisms that we can work through to regulate, to sanitize, the social media ecosystem that we're talking about here.
We'll get to standards for the media and we'll get to other aspects, but I just realized that the chieftaincy bit, I wanted us to briefly get into that, and we sort of forgot.
Joe should speak to the chieftaincy bit, but
I just want a brief take on that as well, because that is also a ticking time bomb we're sitting on. I sit here and sometimes I listen to the utterances, the very political utterances, the very unfactual, non-factual utterances sometimes. And these are people who also have, they come with a certain clout. Traditional systems have been with us even before colonialism, unfortunately, came and sort of took away that. But they have communities that follow what they say. People who will feed into stereotypes or negativity. What's the take on that?
Yes, I'm happy you brought the element of colonialism. At the time, the chief and the political actors were lockstep, in terms of who should lead the country. It used to be the traditional leaders, and modernization, institutionalization, politics, and governance turned it around. And now we had the political party leading. And because of the sanctity of the chieftaincy institution, and because they command a certain respect and the holiness, quote unquote, of a chief that we reverend, we don't expect you to get yourself into modern form of governance, which is politics. Because politics somehow divide us, which should not be the case. It comes with this insult you are talking about, it comes with campaigning. The constitution was categorical and divided the chief from active partisan politics. And if you want to do that, you either resign as a chief. But what have we seen over the period? The chiefs are now being confronted, to me, in my view, two crises. One is chieftaincy conflict, which is a threat to the peace of this country. One, or the other one, is they getting into politics and making endorsement of one political party or the other. Once you do that, you've divided your subjects.
Exactly.
Once you do that, you have divided your kingdom. You
can point to your needs.
Exactly.
You can point to what is happening and what is not happening. But once you side to one, towards one end.
And I'm saying that we sometimes not being honest as to ourselves, because there are laws, and the laws have to be enforced. So if a chief make that comment, which is divisive, which is partisan, the law must work. The world must work. But you see, we are always going for the small fishes and say, oh, let's go and deal with that guy. But you have left the chief who command a lot of subjects. So the chief
even with the chiefs.
Exactly.
Sometimes you would realize that it depends on what kind of chief.
Exactly. So
someone can say something and it is bad, but it is this chief or that paramountcy or this person from this part of the country. Another one says it, and because that one is a lesser chief or something, that one people will go after.
So it's about fairness, equity in application of the law, which we have not able to do that effectively in this country, in my view, right? So we thought the chief has a mandate in addressing hate speech, because when their division is happening in their communities, and they feel the heat more than those in the cities. Right. So bringing them to using their authority was a very good thing that we thought, if we get them to do the advocacy also. And I'm hope that from here, and when Secretary Kono II came, he made a very fantastic remarks. And he really actually broke the subject into crisis, into causes, into the solution, and what we could all do. And he said that, for example, the political parties, politicians are the first culprit, and which you all know. And therefore, it's charging them that going forward, they should be more decorum, and there should be some regulation also thrown to the parliament to think through how they can regulate the social media. And the hate speech should be totally eliminated, or if not reduced in our country.
I think where we want to see our chiefs mostly is like we're seeing today in the Daily Graphic. Otumfuo steps in to resolve Boko conflict.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen similar things in the past. Togbi Afede, among other prominent chiefs who have done such things. Those are the things we want to see, rather than the hate speech and everything.
But you see, the point that you see, sometimes we also don't have to fault the chiefs too much because of the partisan nature of our.
It is true.
Exactly, because see, what is it? It's the money that is fueling the elections, monetization of elections, and because the political capital is coming from the constituent and communities, politicians will always find a way of influencing that base.
But that's also because we've made it a zero-sum game.
Exactly.
So you can't sit on the fence.
Exactly.
You must be either here or there. You can't be in the middle.
But I think for chiefs,
that's a sort of...
You can have a political, lineage. I mean, you can have sympathies for a particular political party, but you don't have to necessarily make it public.
I agree with you on that.
At all, because then you divide your subjects.
Let's steer the conversation now back towards the politicians, because there's an interesting aspect of this conversation. Their ownership of the media.
Exactly.
Go back how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and it wasn't this widespread. But now, you look at the print media, the broadcast media, social media entities, websites, and all of that, and politicians are heavily present.
Everywhere.
What that means is they also influence the discourse, whether for the negative or for the positive. I mean, let's face the facts. You can read the same story. I always have fun doing that. One story, you went and covered an event. One person said a number of things. Now, on one aspect of what the person said, pick about 5 or 6 different newspapers. Depending on where they sit politically, you will see the different captions, different headlines, and different slants. Yeah. That is it. That is what we're talking about.
We say that he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so for media ownership at the moment, I think it's one of the critical challenges that we have. We have noticed that depending on the ideology, depending on which political party any media is sympathetic to or it's towing, it influences the content that they put out. And it happens during elections, it happens during major discussions, like you said, the slants that are put on the stories that we journalists, we go to cover events, but depending on which media house you are from, you put a certain political or partisan slant on it just to be able to, feed into the ownership ideology. And these things keep happening all the time. In fact, I think in 2020, one of the things we did was to monitor professionalism within the Ghanaian media space. And it was interesting to know that one of the biggest challenges we have is the ownership and how it affects content. And then the challenge of decency. So we have a lot of content out there that is not decent, and it's because sometimes related to issues of lack of training, the required skills to be able to do quality programming. And quality programming is supposed to be devoid of the insults and all of those things. It is happening. And then the ownership dictating which content should be on air at any point in time. We have also noted, I think one of the reasons why we brought Giba to be part of the panelists was to also hear, because Giba is supposed to be Association of the Independent Broadcasters, in Ghana. The broadcast medium is actually one of the areas that we see a lot of these things happening. So we brought them, and Giba says that they have a code of conduct. So how is it that despite the code of conduct, the existence of a code of conduct, we still see the ownership reflecting in content to the extent that it also then divides audiences, divides listeners, and forces people into echo chambers. So I listen to this particular station, and it's because at the end of the day they feed into my political ideology.
I buy this newspaper because I know it toes a certain line.
Yeah. But you see, the thing is that for how long shall we continue to talk about media ownership as a problem? For how long shall we continue to talk about sustainability of media as a problem? We saw this coming. We saw this coming. Once we moved to liberalize the media and the airwave, they used to be the monopoly of GBC or the state broadcaster. But once we liberalized and the private sector came into being and then expanding the...
Are you saying that that in itself was a problem?
It was a good thing, no. But we did not put in the mechanism to address the excess. This is where always the problem lies. So we have
created a hydra-headed
exactly. So we're liberalizing the media the space, and more are coming now. The online has come to become another important mouthpiece in the supply chain of information on a daily basis. But we've been talking about ownership. Can't we begin to address that issue? That question I'm asking myself, is it beyond our limit to address that challenge? Which I don't think is so, because we have to start working. There is, if you get a spectrum and open a radio or media or whatever, a TV or that, there are requirements to that. There are laws regulating that. As a media owner, you have a responsibility to ensure your gatekeeping role. You have a responsibility to ensure professional standard and all that. As an anchor of a news, you have a responsibility. As an editor, you have a responsibility. You see, that change of editorial standard needs to be activated in the various media houses. If you're not doing that, NMC has a responsibility, NC has a responsibility to ensure that the law is being applied. So that's what I'm saying, that for how long shall we continue talking about the problem? Would that not necessarily taking steps to addressing the problem?
There are two sides to that as well, because I'll be coming to you about whether we need more standardization for the media. People have even said that, look, professionally, if you want to be an accountant, there's a body, there's a process you go through. If you want to be an engineer, there's a process you go through. If you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a pharmacist, if you want to be a marketer, chartered marketer, if you want to be an HR professional, all of these bodies, a medical doctor, have professional associations and routes that you go through. I'll be coming to you shortly on that. But on that very point you are making, so many thoughts are going through my head. Okay. But maybe I'll just come to the bit about the standardization then. Do we need more?
I think we have enough, honestly. I mean, who is a journalist and who is maybe a media practitioner? I think we have enough. I honestly think we have enough. Some people go
Maybe I should come back to you. Who is a journalist? Because nowadays you have anybody who wields maybe just a phone with a handheld whatever, goes round, shoots a few things, says a few things, or can articulate, and we all say journalist.
Yeah, but which is good, because then it's expanding the frontier of freedom of speech and media freedom.
But what are the consequences?
But I'm saying that we see the problem coming, but our ability to put in mechanism to address it is always not there or limited. Because once you pave the way for citizen journalism, these are mature, they're not professional. The likelihood for them to bring unsavory comments is very high. The likelihood for them to spin the hate speech is very high. The likelihood for them to bring hateful content will be there. And that is why regulation, to my view, needs to start a conversation around it.
We need to start a conversation around
it. Because you see, it becomes a threat to us. It's a threat to the peace, our relative peace now. I'm saying that we are sitting on a timing bomb. Only God knows when it will explode. For us to now give ourselves to the political actors, authorities, to step in, and when they step in, it has a very dire consequence. The other issue about media ownership, in my view, is that, and of course, he said there are more laws. We have the GIBA Code of Conduct, we have NMC Code of Conduct, we have GJA, and now recently, National Peace Council have launched guidelines on hate speech and other forms of indecent expression in this country. What I'm expecting them to do, and I hope they will do, is to activate the advocacy element of it, so that this guideline is more known to more citizens, more media, and all that.
Okay. Let me just, on that same trajectory, I just want to pick her thoughts on this bit. Standards, yes. Mm-hmm. But sometimes don't we get hypocritical? Because we've heard sometimes, some utterances within the media that are in poor taste. Mm-hmm. I don't want to cite. Some have been taken to court. Others are in the process of getting to court. Yeah. Others have led to people being, unfortunately, beaten and all of that, which is not right. Yeah. But we've seen all of that happen. sometimes to within the media, and we must take criticism when it's due.
Yeah.
I mean, we are not paragons of virtue. Sometimes we get it wrong. When that happens, sometimes there is also the charge, oh, they're attacking the media, which is true. Sometimes there are blatant, unwarranted attacks. But there are other times too when the wrong things have been done and some targeting must happen. How do we find the balance? Because sometimes, I mean, the people, hey, and you are trying to clamp down on, you know, the media or freedom of speech. But sometimes, honestly, people step out of line.
Yes, and I think we should be able to call out those excesses. There is something we say at the Media Foundation. So who watches the watchdog? We say that the media is the watchdog of a society, but then who is watching the media as well to be able to call out the excesses? We definitely sometimes, you know, fall foul of our own ethics. You know, sometimes in your publications, you may not have fact-checked something and you went ahead to publish and you get sued, or somebody gets offended by some of the publications we put out.
Which is where sometimes when you do get it wrong, I mean, you may get it right 99% of the time. If 1% you get it wrong, you should be able to come out and say, oh, this time I got this wrong, which I feel our politicians could learn as well. They could take a leaf from that.
Hopefully they do. Hopefully they do. But I think that, you see, we also in the job of conscience. I think that for journalism, you also need conscience, because what we do impacts so much in the public interests. You know, and so as much as possible, if at any point in time you feel you have erred in your publication, it's only fair. And organizations like Media Foundation would always call out the excesses of the media. What we've also realized is that even across the West Africa sub-region, media associations and journalist associations also need to have a strong voice when it comes to the media agenda, such that if there is that collective body and practitioners fall foul of their own ethics, we should condemn, you know, in no uncertain terms, condemn, but then watching out again for the fraternity, such that we don't, and that's why we talk about some level of self-regulation for the media. So we don't leave it to the hands of the state, we don't leave it in the hands of politicians who will then censor you to the point where you don't have the freedom to be able to do your work.
Because they will always go to the excess.
Exactly. Exactly. But if we are all minded that we are guided by codes of conduct and codes of ethics as far as this profession is concerned, then we should be able to live up to it. And when we fall foul of it, we should be able to call out the excesses and condemn those.
Before we get to my very last question for both of you, on the bit about standards, what is your take? You say we have enough standards. How do we go about enforcing, implementing those standards?
So I think that, first of all, the standards, we actually agree to have standards, and that's why we talk about self-regulation for the media. So we have our codes of ethics that are supposed to be guiding us as practitioners. We should be able to live up to it. There is also the responsibility.
You wonder whether the standards are the same, especially for local station media.
They are the same.
Sometimes
journalism is journalism.
It is. No. I'm just saying that sometimes you listen to some programs and you wonder, is it the same terrain we're on, or is this a different set of journalists, and are we... I don't know whether you've ever noticed, but
of course.
Usually, I'm not saying this disparagingly, but with the local dialects, sometimes what they can do, you dare not try it on. I don't know why, but they get away with the whole lot.
But that's why we also need to keep hammering, you know, the bit about the education, you know, the skills building, the knowledge building for journalists and for practitioners, because we really need to also be on top of the issues and on top of some of the things that we get to discuss on our programs. There is also a strong responsibility on the part of media houses themselves. It will shock you, Benjamin, that in most of these media houses, there are no editorial policies really that guide anybody. I mean, once you come in, you have the gift of the gab, you speak well, you can speak the local language well. You just jump behind the microphone and you're rolling and you know, you are the talk of town. So if the media houses themselves are also minded about the business, core business of journalism, not just the commercial aspects, not just because we are pro-partisan and want to do a certain political party agenda, then the ethics should also guide even the media. I have always asked, so really, journalists complain about remuneration, about salaries, about equipment to work and all of that. And yet we have a lot of radio stations, a lot of media houses coming up every day. What is the motivation? in between elections, you have a lot of these media houses almost going to comatose until then in election year, they rise, they come back to life, and they are disturbing all over the place. I think that we should be able to live by the standards of our profession. It is the only way that people outside of the profession will also accord journalists the respect that, you know, is due us. Because sometimes you go into discussions with state artists, political artists, and they are always complaining about journalists and talk to your people, and we say we are not supposed to be PR, you know, units or extensions or megaphones of politicians or of local government officials and all of that. We are supposed to do our work in a professional manner for the public good, for the public interest, so that we can entrench our own democracy.
Okay. To wrap up the conversation, I'll give you a minute each, Kojo and Abigail, a minute each. I would have wanted to bring in the RTI element and how it feeds into all of this, but for the sake of time, I will not. I'll just ask you, what then is the roadmap for the Media Foundation for West Africa? What do you hope to see this year, especially as we prepare for an electoral year next year? Yeah. What are some of the things you want to bring to bear? What do you want to see ahead of election 2024? A minute each. I'll start with you, Kojo.
Right. So, as it's straightforward, we are expecting to consolidate the peace in this country. You know, that's a very important element of our democratic culture. And if we do anything untoward to disturb the peace, we disturb our development as well. You know, so we're expecting, especially our political parties, to stay on the decorum that they are doing now. So far, we've not had any excesses in their campaigning, and we hope they will continue with that. Even the excesses, they are very minor ones. They'll continue to that. Even especially as we enter 2024, that is the heat of the election. We expect them to do that. Also, we're expecting the media. We're talking about professionalism, right? I'm happy you brought issue of midwifery, pharmacy council, and all that. Once any of their members found fault of the law, they crack the whip. But in the case of the media, I'm not sure that is done. The code of ethics are all voluntary. You know, so one is voluntary, there's no compulsion. I think we need to look at that element also, but then the consciousness, as my colleague is talking about, you have to appeal to your consciousness. We're expecting the media also to play a very professional role on that. We also expect the civil society, you know, the issue about social media and its excesses. Who does that? That, for me, is a gap.
Okay.
And that's why this conversation in this national forum is very important for us to begin to tie the knot and see how do we set an agenda that is trying to regulate the social media or conversation around it, and how do we eliminate hate speech in our body politics? Maybe in setting that agenda, maybe we need a lot more of those engagements.
Well, I think as we go into elections 2024, we know we know there are media institutions who say, no, look, we are. I remember in 2012, there were people who told us when we had conversations that, look, we want this candidate to win, and that's what we are about. Please don't. We know about ethics and professionalism, but we want this candidate to win. While they do that, because we still think that there will be some media that will be, you know, covertly, you know, pro-partisan. While they do that, they should also be mindful of the ethics of the profession and also the general peace of the country, because this is all the country that we have. We will continue to monitor as Media Foundation, because certainly somebody must be watching the watchdog, and we'll continue to watch the watchdog of society, which is the media, and come up. We'll call them out. We'll call our own people out if they go overboard. But we'll also continue to advocate around issues of access to information, around issues of press freedom, around issues of media professionalism and all of that. Together, we all want to consolidate democracy that we have at the moment. In fact, what is happening in the region is scary, because you look at Ghana and Senegal, for instance, that were countries that when you talk about democracy, you will point to in West Africa region. Now Senegal is going through a lot of turmoil as we speak. Right. And even in Ghana, there are a couple of issues when it comes to, you know, the press freedom indicators and all of that. So we really need to all together work at protecting and consolidating the democracy of our country.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Kojo, Abigail, for joining the conversation. I think it's the first time I've had both of you. You, I think we've had a conversation before at some point,
I think so.
But Abigail, no. So good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Our guests have been Dr. Kojo Imprem, Director of Research and Advocacy, Media Foundation for West Africa, together with Abigail Labi Ode, Manager, Media and Good Governance Program, Media Foundation for West Africa. Now, when we return after the next break, we're going to be talking about Father's Day, which is this Sunday. I'm sure you have a father somewhere to celebrate. I do remember but we're going to be sharing the story of someone who has gone through depression and a lot of other things, but still stands that we must celebrate our fathers. Our guest is gospel musician Irabna. She'll be on the show up next.